voluntary evacuation order was issued.
Katrina.
You should leave, but you don't have to, along with the following warning. Areas affected by the storm will remain uninhabitable for weeks, perhaps longer. At least one half of all well-built structures will suffer roof or wall failure. Persons, pets, and livestock exposed to the wind will face certain death if struck. Airborne disease will be widespread. Water shortages will make human suffering unimaginable by modern standards. That night, after midnight, Katrina becomes a Category 4 storm. By 7 a.m. Sunday morning, it is a Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds in excess of 160 miles per hour and gusting well over 200. For you international visitors, 160 miles per hour is approximately equal to 260 kilometers per hour. So, at 9 o'clock in the morning, on Sunday, a mandatory evacuation order was issued. Non-optional. You must leave. This was the first of its kind in 140 years. The last time a major American city had been issued a mandatory evacuation order was Atlanta, Georgia, during the Civil War. Approximately 1.2 million people left southern Louisiana and New Orleans. About 100,000 stayed. Some stayed because they had nowhere else to go. Some stayed because they had no way to get anywhere else. Many stayed because they were simply stubborn and they just refused to leave. My aunt and uncle were two of the stubborn ones. They could have left New Orleans, simply refused to do so. Many of those that did not have a way to get out of the city were covered by the mandatory evacuation plan, which activated school buses and city buses to help take the people out. Unfortunately, the voluntary evacuation order issued 24 hours before released all city employees, so the bus drivers had left with their families. I called up the service under the mandatory evacuation plan. They were hundreds of miles away. The buses remained empty and unused here in the city. Approximately 10,000 people went to the shelter of last resort. They went to the Superdome. Well, there was food and water for those 10,000. This was provided by FEMA, and it was intended to last for 2 days. The 250 Reserve National Guard troops were activated. Out of the thousands available, the governor activated 250. They were placed under the command of a man that had just graduated from law school. He joined the National Guard as an attorney and was given officer's rank commensurate with his new position, as is tradition. As the highest ranking officer in the Superdome, he was placed in command, having never led men on or off the field. Sometime after midnight, the rain began to fall and the wind began to rise and rise and rise and rise. At 4 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, the industrial canal off the starboard bow broke open, and the lower ninth ward began to flood. At 5 a.m., the other side of the industrial canal broke. What used to be a Navy yard began to flood. At 6, the East New Orleans levee, which is miles behind us, was overtopped by a massive storm surge. East New Orleans begins to flood. Katrina makes landfall around 6:15 in the morning, southeast of here. This is approximately the same time that the power plant supplying electricity to the city flooded, shut down, would not come back online for 6 weeks. Over the next few hours, as Katrina makes its way past New Orleans, breaches, breaks, and overtops occur all across the city. There was no one single type of failure or location that the levees failed. Different things happened in different places. In Luther Avenue, in the nice suburbs around the Yacht Club, on the other side of the city, the levees are too short, the water goes over the top. The Four Points Canal, the levees are intact, the flood walls on top of the levees break. The New Orleans Canal, which was unfinished, it was the gate leading to the unfinished portion that broke open. The worst breach by far, no comparison, was that leading to the lower Ninth Ward. As the storm approached New Orleans, almost all of the traffic in the port of New Orleans went upriver. All of the barges, the push boats, the container ships, the pleasure craft, they all went upriver ahead of the storm. almost all. At least one barge was left in the city. It was left in the industrial canal. When the winds begin to rise and the waves begin to rock, it broke free of its lines, and hundreds of thousands of pounds of metal began slamming like a battering ram against the dirt pile into 1 inch of concrete protecting the lower ninth ward. The barge punches through. The water begins to rush inward. The inrushing water further erodes the breach, widening it. By the time the erosion had finished, that break in the levees was 400 feet long. Katrina passes New Orleans a little before 10 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, and the wind begins to die very quickly. But the damage has been done. In 12.5 places across the city, the levee systems have failed in some way. The wind is dying, but the water is rising. Most people in the rapidly flooding areas did not realize that they were in a flood until it was too late. The reason being, if you were in a Category 5 hurricane, or any strong hurricane, you do not stand next to a glass window and look outside. It is far too dangerous. You've got plywood over your windows. People are in the center of their homes, away from potentially deadly flying glass. They are aware that they are in a flood when the water is coming in under the doors. At that point, it is too late to leave your home. New Orleans houses are almost all raised, especially in the low-lying areas. By the time the water is coming in under the doors, it is at least 2 feet deep outside. The flooding is coming from a point source, or sources, which means that the water itself is moving very, very quickly. You cannot step into 2 feet of fast-moving, debris-filled water and survive. Even the wind has died down to non-lethal levels. The people of New Orleans, trapped by the rising water, went the only direction they could. They went up. Go to their second floor if they had it, with their attics if they didn't. Many, many thousands of men, women, and children in the city survived because of 6 words. That is a literal statement. Those 6 words are, keep an axe in your attic. Since 1965, it has been standard hurricane preparation in the low-lying areas of New Orleans to keep an axe in your attic. Many of those axes have been placed there years, if not decades before, and never touched. And now, as the water rises, the people retreat into their attics. And the water continues to rise into the attics, trapping them there and rising still. Those that had axes had the ability to cut their way to their own roofs and escape the rising water. Those that didn't. That was why whenever you saw pictures or video of people stranded on rooftops after Hurricane Katrina, there was almost always a large hole in the roof. That was not staying there.